Welcome to the third episode of our new series where we test different guns and see how well they conceal carry. This week we have the Sig P365. In this video, we're gonna be touching on topics like comfort, concealability, and effectiveness. At the end of this video, we're gonna give this gun a final rating so you can compare it to the other videos we've done in this series. So jumping right in, let's talk about the specs about this build. So one of the important things about comfort when you're concealed carrying is gonna be the size and weight. This entire setup is 8 3/4 by 7 inches, which is very similar to the Glock 43X. It's only about a ½ inch bigger in both dimensions. You'll see that a lot of people dismiss the X Macro because they say it's too big to carry. Frankly, I disagree with that. I think it's a perfect carry gun for larger people like myself. This setup is not that much larger than the often recommended Glock 43X. So when people say that this is just too big to carry, I completely disagree. As I mentioned earlier, this is an X Macro, but not your standard X Macro. We're using an X Macro frame on top of a standard 365 slide with a Herrington Arms 365 2P compensator on there. Something worth noting is we usually only run a standard OEM 365 slide, but on here we have a Lone Wolf Dawn 365 slide. I really like the look of this, and it's not so chopped up that it's unrecognizable. I like very sleek slides that don't have a lot of crazy machine work done to them. And I think Lone Wolf really did a good job on this, so we're giving it a try. So far, I've really liked this build. I shoot it really well. I will say I really don't notice a difference in recoil or anything for that matter with this slide over OEM. It's purely aesthetic. So if you're gonna do a build like this and you care about what something looks like, I think this is a pretty good option. Over OEM, it looks very sleek, but really it's not gonna add much benefit to the overall build. On top, per usual, we're running a Holosun 407K optic on here. We've ran this optic extensively on other guns. I like it a lot. I think it does a really nice job. It's also a really good bang for your buck. It's relatively inexpensive. Of course, we're running a True Precision threaded barrel in here. We run this in a lot of builds. It's nothing new to the channel. We run a lot of True Precision barrels. And finally, a TLR7 sub. This is my favorite subcompact weapon light, so we had to include it. I think it's incredibly important to carry a firearm with a weapon light, frankly, because you can't shoot what you can't see. With this carry setup, we are running 2 X Macro 17 round mags. This is what really made me interested in the X Macro, and it's one of the reasons we started doing these builds, is you can do a really cool integrated Frankenstein build, and you get 17 round capacity. This, I think, is what makes this gun special. The standard 365 is a cool little gun. Wasn't necessarily my cup of tea because the grip wasn't big enough. The fact that Sig made this grip a little bit bigger, which was perfect for my hands, and it holds 17 rounds, really just made this the ideal candidate for a carry gun. Now I showed you guys what the gun is that we are carrying, but let's talk about the holster and the other setup. This is the Tier 1 Concealed Axis Elite. In my opinion, this holster is elite. I think it's one of the better options on the market. And there's just a lot of little things that really add up that make this such a great carry option. So as I've mentioned in previous videos, this holster does flex with your body, which makes it incredibly comfortable to carry. It does have a wing that pushes the gun into your body and helps you with printing. The clips are very nice. They are ride height adjustable. They're very stiff. They feel very rigid. Along with that is the adjustability of the wing itself. So if you adjust the ride height of your clip, you can adjust the ride height of your wing. A lot of times you'll see holster manufacturers that just bolt this solidly to the holster and you can't adjust that. Not only can you adjust the ride height, but you can also adjust how much pressure this wing adds to your belt and pushes the gun into your body. If you feel like it's pushing in your body too much, remove some of these inserts and reduce that. It's just infinitely adjustable. One thing that isn't adjustable is the little ridges in the holster here that pushes on the belt, which pushes the mag into your body. Frankly, I think this is perfect. You wouldn't need adjustability here. With how light this mag is and how thin it is, it's not something that's gonna be noticeable if it's a little bit further or closer to your body, but it is really nice to see these ridges here working as a wedge. It's one of the things you typically don't see with other holsters. So obviously we like Tier 1 Conceal a lot. We've ran them in the last 2 videos. And I want to keep it a constant with this series because frankly, I think they're one of the better ones on the market and a lot of people don't recognize the benefits. But with that being said, Tier 1 Concealed sent us this holster for free like they did the last 2. But they did not expect us to send the video early. They did not pay us to say anything specific. I truly believe they make a great product, and that's why we offered to include them into this video. I could have chose anybody, but I chose Tier 1 Concealed because I personally have run their stuff for many years and I like it a lot. With that being said, I'm not afraid to talk about the downsides of this holster. 2 of them being, I told them I was going to run a mag extension and I did not. So this mag sits incredibly deep, which obviously they engineered that to be that way. So if you had a mag extension, it wasn't sticking up all goofy past the end of your gun. So they did it right by offering that. However, I did not throw an extension on here, and reloads were pretty tricky. When you reload a handgun and you grab a mag, The closer the tip of your finger is to where the bullet is, the easier it is going to be to direct it into the mag well. Well, whenever your mag is like this, you can only grab the tip. So I found myself butching a lot of reloads with this setup, and it is not the holster's fault. It is my fault for not getting the correct depth for the mag. If you're thinking ahead, you're trying to make this depth proper for a mag extension, maybe think again. I would have personally have gotten the regular height for this mag. It would be sitting about right here, which would have been perfect for reloads. So keep that in mind if you're looking for a holster for next macro. Maybe not opt for this depth. I would prefer the standard mag depth. Another thing that was kind of a bummer that was potentially miscommunication was they left the front closed, which is really nice on some guns, especially when you shoot a lot. Reholstering, you're not going to feel the heat of the compensator as fast. To get the gun to fit with this comped slide, I had to Dremel some of the material away to get that to slide through. Again, not a big issue. We had a Dremel. It took me maybe 2 minutes. It's probably not the prettiest Dremel job in the world, but it works really well. Again, those are my only 2 complaints I've found with this holster, and both of them are my fault. Definitely something to keep in mind if you're looking at a quality holster is think ahead, and if you are going to comp something, you're better off just doing an open front holster. The closed front is just going to limit you in the future if you ever want to comp it or even put a threaded barrel on it. With the material in the front, it just makes it that much harder to do both of those things. So if you're going to think ahead on anything, definitely recommend an open front holster. So all of those features I talked about on the holster is really going to help with the comfort of concealed carrying this handgun. The next thing is going to be weight. If you're carrying a really heavy setup, even with a rigid belt and nice jeans, you're still gonna feel that weight when you're concealed carrying. This entire setup, loaded down with 34 bullets, weighed 3 pounds and 13 ounces. Not bad considering the Glock 43X weighed 3 pounds and 12 ounces. So this only weighs an ounce more, and it held 2 more rounds of ammo. Again, leaning into the fact that I think this is still a very viable carry option, even though it is the larger X macro frame. A lot of people push the Glock 43X because it is light, but in reality, this entire setup only weighed an ounce more than a 43X, which I can guarantee you would not notice in your waistline when you're carrying. So same as last time, we were using a Core Essentials belt and jeans, and then we were also using Arrowhead joggers and shorts. The reason we chose these is this kind of covers all bases for concealed carry. With this belt, it is pretty much perfect for everyday use. It's one of the things I like so much about it is its adjustability and its ratchet system. And with the joggers, it is a more casual experience. It is still very comfortable. It's more of a new trend to be able to carry with joggers. A couple years ago, that would have just not been possible. Same thing with the shorts. Unless you were wearing cargo shorts, you could not carry a gun. So it is really refreshing to see more options on the market like that. I ran the jeans most of the time, like the last 2 videos. I only wore the joggers for 1 whole day and the shorts for 1 whole day. Frankly, I did that because it's not how I enjoy to carry the gun. I prefer carrying with jeans and a belt. Those did fine, it's just not exactly my cup of tea. If you're someone that wears joggers, I think they do a really nice job of fitting that niche. They feel like regular joggers with the ability to carry a gun. So when sitting at work all day, they were incredibly comfortable. Shorts were the same way. I really like the length of the shorts. I really like the material of the shorts. They're very comfortable. The only thing I didn't like is the belt. It just feels very out of place. I really like to use a different belt setup. I think it would not bunch up as much and be a lot more comfortable. So I had to move these clips down, which made the gun sit up higher. I will say I noticed with this 365, it sat more comfortably, maxed out with the ride height than the 43X did. The 43X still felt a little bit low, whereas these felt pretty much perfect with the shorts and joggers, which is definitely a first for the subcompact handguns. With the 320, it wasn't a big deal, but I noticed when we switched to that 43X, the gun still felt a little low. Wasn't the case with the 365, it was very comfortable. So with the 365 sitting a little bit higher than the 43X, it's going to feel more comfortable when working out. You're gonna be able to bend your hips some more if you're squatting. I don't know why this is. Frankly, I thought this gun would sit deeper than the 43X, being a little bit longer. Just wasn't the case. This had more ride height adjustability. It's a little side note. I'm not sure why that is. It must be the way they manufacture the holster, but I can definitely applaud it. It's nice to get this gun a little bit higher in shorts when you're working out. So same as last time, no issues with any upper body stuff necessarily. The way I was squatted, this holster leaves plenty of room for the gun to sit in your waistline. When it comes to squatting, you don't notice it tremendously, even all the way down, and I'm not the best squatter by any means, but I had no problems with squatting. I really don't think this carry setup is that big of an issue for working out until you get on the Peloton. Again, when you're sitting normally, not a big deal, but as soon as you lean forward, this really likes to bind. If you're a man, it really likes to bind, not comfortable at all. The 365 was very similar to the 43 in the way of feeling. The The 320 was a big difference. It was just a lot bigger, a lot more cumbersome. But if you're gonna go with a 43 or a 365, it's a pretty good option if you carry appendix to work out. When it comes to strong side, obviously we haven't done any testing. I would assume it'd be better in some cases, but honestly, appendix, if you're gonna work out and live your life outside of the gym, you really can't go wrong. So with this carry setup, obviously I really enjoyed carrying the Core Essentials belt with jeans, and the joggers are still growing on me. They're definitely not my favorite, but they're really nice to throw in there if you are somebody who typically wears joggers or somebody who likes to work out while carrying a gun. I think it's a fantastic option for a lot of people. And even though it's not my favorite way to carry, I definitely would be remiss not trying it, especially with all the opportunities to carry a lot of different guns. One thing I've noticed about the Arrowhead joggers and shorts is they feel very similar to carrying the Core Essentials belt and jeans setup, which is a testament to their engineering. With carrying this setup with all 3 different systems, this gun carried almost identically to the 43X. It's almost the exact same length and grip length. It's essentially the same size gun, just weighing 1 ounce more. To me, it wasn't very noticeable. So I'm gonna give this entire carry setup an 8.9 out of 10. That is a little bit higher than the Glock 43 and significantly higher than the 320. All of them were comfortable with the belt and jean setup, but not all of them were great in the joggers. They just sat so low. There are not many things you could do to this setup to get it more comfortable. Frankly, the only thing I could think is removing a weapon light and removing the spare mag holder to make it a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter. Honestly, with both setups, weight really wasn't that noticeable. It was more of a size thing. And again, this is one of the smaller setups that we've tried, so even that wasn't a big deal. I think it's a very versatile setup that a lot of people would feel comfortable carrying. So that's why we had to give it an 8.9 out of 10. So now let's talk about the effectiveness of this setup. This is a very important aspect of concealed carry. You don't want to carry a gun that you're not effective with. This 365 is essentially the smaller brother of the 320. This gun holds a lot of resemblance to the 320, which it's the gun I shoot my best drill times with. The 365 definitely has that potential. The trigger feels very similar. The grip feels very similar. Yes, there is some more recoil even with the compensator, but the recoil pattern feels similar. I think that aids in the fact of why I'm so effective with this handgun, but there's a couple things that are just completely different that are worth noting that definitely affect my effectiveness. One of those things being the ergonomics. This gun is incredibly ergonomic. It's incredibly comfortable in my hands. There are virtually no hot spots and the length of pull is pretty much perfect. What I mean when I say length of pull, it's essentially where the trigger falls on your finger. This one breaks at pretty much the perfect location. A lot of times when I pull the trigger, it feels like I'm too far back and I can't shoot very fast. I find that handguns that have a longer length of pull, I can just shoot faster. And when we're talking about effectiveness, that's definitely a key aspect. It's gonna be speed and accuracy. So going over those 2 aspects, we obviously have a red dot in here that is gonna affect accuracy. For some reason, a lot of people are still reluctant to put an optic on a handgun. And I definitely understand why that is, especially when you pick one up for the first time and you've never handled an optic and you're fishing around for the dot in your optic. I can see how that would be a turnoff, but with 5 or 10 minutes of practice, you're not gonna have that issue. If you get a gun, you put an optic on it, here's what you do to solve that. All you have to do is pick a spot on the wall, draw and place your dot on that 1,000 times, and you're gonna get consistent enough that it's just gonna become muscle memory. You should be able to pick up, present, and your irons are gonna be exactly where they need to be. So if you threw an optic on there, theoretically the only thing that's gonna change is the gun is gonna come down a little bit. Should be solvable within 5 minutes. If you practice enough, you should be comfortable taking a shot 25, 30, 40 yards away. One thing that took me a while to realize when shooting dots is the speed aspect of it. When you present your gun on target and you have iron sights, your sights take up most of the target. So unless you're just punching off rounds and you wanna try to be accurate, it's gonna take you longer to get your iron sights lined up and present them on a target where you know you're gonna have a hit. With a dot, and you present, you know that dot is exactly where your bullet's going. You don't have to try to line up sights. You don't have to think about how your sights take up the majority of the target and it's going to be somewhere in the center of the front sight post. It's just a lot faster. So that's going to increase both speed and accuracy. With the compensator, not much is going to be going on for accuracy. It is going to be all speed. This is going to reduce your split times. So when you pop off a round, it's going to get your dot or your iron sights back on target faster, allowing you to shoot faster. This is incredibly important because if you can get more rounds downrange in a shorter amount of time, it can greatly reduce that risk. The longer somebody poses a threat, the more danger you are in, people around you are in. So the more rounds you can send downrange faster, the better you are. Compensator is going to help a lot with that. One thing to keep in mind with compensators is there really are a couple different kinds. Here we have 2 ports out the top. This is going to be putting all the emphasis on muzzle flip. We make a compensator that is a 3-port that has side ports. That compensator really helps in the in-the-hand felt recoil. So if you're an older person or a newer shooter, the hand cannon feel of a pistol is going to be greatly reduced. It's not going to feel as punchy in your hand, and it's going to reduce the muzzle flip. Here we're running the 365 2P with all of the focus being on muzzle flip. I still notice a little bit of reduction in the feel of your hand, but since this is an X macro build, we wanted to throw the dual port on there and really focus on the muzzle flip aspect. One thing that makes a difference on effectiveness is the weapon light. You cannot shoot what you cannot see. I can't stress this enough. People, for some reason, still don't understand how important it is to throw a light on your handgun. So if you really think about it and you have an offhand weapon light, and whether you shoot like this or you shoot like this, you're still only shooting with one hand. And I don't know about you, but if I shoot one-handed, there's a lot more recoil and I can shoot a lot slower. I cannot shoot nearly as fast as I can with two hands firmly planted on the gun. You can click it on and have constant on and see exactly what you're shooting, and it's going to add some weight, which is incredibly important for recoil. The more weight you have on a build, the less recoil you're actually going to feel. When it's dark out, a weapon light is going to allow you to increase speed. It's going to allow you to see and process information faster, which will allow you to eliminate a threat much faster. Again, adding speed to your build, and it definitely adds a level of accuracy. Like I said earlier, you can't shoot what you can't see. You can see your target, you can make accurate hits. It's definitely important. It plays to both factors of effectiveness. Last thing I'm going to talk about is going to be the magazine. We're holding 17 rounds. This does not add speed, but it does add effectiveness. The ability to carry more ammunition makes you be able to eliminate more threats or firmly eliminate a single threat. Carrying more ammo on you is incredibly important because this is a 9mm handgun. And let's be real, if you're carrying 9mm ammunition, even if it's carry ammo, people can still absorb a lot of rounds and be deadly. Just is what it is with 9mm and frankly most handgun ammunition. So having more capacity is of the utmost importance. While it does not add speed, I think this is one of the most overlooked things about a carry handgun. You see a lot of chopped guns like the Glock 26 where you can't even get your pinky on the bottom of the gun. It holds a few rounds. Or the OEM Glock 43X, it only holds 10 rounds. Or while that seems like a decent amount of ammo, I can shoot a bill drill in about 1.5 seconds. So I could go through that entire amount of ammunition in 3 seconds. 3 seconds is not a lot amount of time. You can burn through that ammo really quickly. That's why I always carry a spare mag, and I prefer a gun that carries over 15 rounds. There's no harm in carrying more ammo besides it adds more weight. Frankly, that's one of the reasons I really admire the 365 is this grip frame. Fits my fingers perfectly. You can see my finger ends just about at the bottom of the grip and it still holds 17 rounds. I'm not sure how Sig managed to do this, but they absolutely nailed it with this magazine size. One thing that can make or break your effectiveness is your holster. The big things with this is obviously a spare mag. As I mentioned, more ammo is better, but also the adjustability factor. If you go to grab your gun and you cannot get your full grip on it, let's say your pants are riding up to here, you're gonna have a very slow draw time. The amount of time it takes for you to recognize a threat and present your gun on target is a very crucial amount of time. It's going to greatly increase or decrease the probability of you getting hurt. That is one of the important factors that the holster plays in your overall effectiveness. Obviously, there's a couple other things that go into your effectiveness with a holster. Like I mentioned, the magazine being at the proper height, retention, all of those things. But I think the biggest thing for me is the ride height adjustability. It's going to allow me to get that gun out faster, not fight with my clothes, not fight with the gun, and it will just make it an overall smooth draw. With this overall setup, having more ride height adjustment in the joggers, it really allowed me to be effective with multiple outfits, multiple layers of clothing. It was just more consistent, allowing me to be more effective, reducing that time it took to engage. The 365 is a great option because it's essentially my favorite gun, which is a 320, sized down for carry. This gun offers a lot of benefits, but essentially it has a 17 round frame with a very small slide that shoots 9mm. To me, this is perfect because it's slim. It's not very long with the comp on it. The HC 365 2P on here reduces a lot of felt recoil. Just a really nice setup. And as you can see, I shoot this gun very well. Honestly, it's probably my favorite carry setup. The Glock 43 definitely competes with it, but this is just a perfectly sized handgun for me to concealed carry, and I shoot it well, which is definitely very important. So I'm gonna give this overall setup a 7 out of 10. Frankly, I think that's a very reasonable score. This gun just has better ergonomics. I can be more effective with fighting recoil. The adjustable ride height was better with this holster setup. It has more capacity than a lot of the subcompact guns on the market. So I think a 7 out of 10 is very fair for this setup. I shot this gun very well, and I'm just very effective with this overall setup. So now let's talk about our final metric, which is concealability. This 365 concealed exceptionally well. I had no issues carrying this in a tight t-shirt with either the joggers, shorts, or core belt setup. This was incredibly comfortable to carry. Obviously the tier 1's working its magic here. There's just so many levels of adjustability with this holster to adjust for different body styles. For me, it's pretty much perfect right out the gate. All I had to do was adjust the ride height between the regular core belt and the Arrowhead joggers or shorts. With this being a larger frame gun, we've heard many times you can't conceal carry a large frame gun like this. And even when you compare this setup to a 43X setup, the grip length is about the same. So it's gonna print about the same. I had absolutely no issues with printing with this setup, even with a regular tighter t-shirt on. And obviously the more layers of clothing you add, the easier it is going to get. I walked around the shop 5 days last week. Nobody had a single idea I was concealed carrying. A lot of times I would get looks, why am I carrying joggers at the office? And then they'd remember, oh, we're shooting a video. That just is a testament to how easy the 365 is to carry. And obviously, if you ditch the X macro frame and you went with the original 365, it's gonna get that much easier. But frankly, for appendix, I don't think it's worth it. I think the larger grip is gonna make you a more effective shooter, allow you to get a better purchase on the gun, and really increase your effectiveness. If you were carrying strong side, I would kind of get it, switching to that smaller 365 frame. Personally, I would never do that. I do not like shooting subcompact handguns where I have fingers hanging off the grip. I know for me, I'm just not effective with speed. And if I'm gonna go through the trouble of carrying a heavy, cumbersome handgun, I might as well carry appendix with what I want. So far, this has been my favorite setup to carry between the 320, the 43X, and now the 365. Most of the time, I didn't even notice it was there, either sitting at my office chair, getting in and out of my truck. Some of the previous guns I carried, I felt uncomfortable getting in and out of my truck. I had to hike up my pants. With this gun, I could just jump right in. I did not notice that extra length. Again, I'm not sure why that is. Theoretically, the 365 X macro holster and the 43X holster should be almost identical. I'm not sure if they had to place these screw locations a little bit higher or what would have caused that. I have heard from many people I've talked to that this is simply too big of a gun to carry, and so far it has been my favorite gun to carry. One thing I don't like about the Arrowhead setup is the bulging in the front, right where the buckle is for the belt. There's just a huge bump there, and somebody may recognize that you have something in your waistline. When it comes to concealing with those pants, you cannot see the handgun. The only thing you notice is the bulge in the front. To some people who wear really tight shirts, it might be much more noticeable. Wearing the Arrowhead joggers around with the bulge, I did not feel self-conscious out and about in the public. I knew people would have no clue that I was carrying a gun. So keep that in mind. Somebody who has a trained eye might be able to notice it. Most people would have no idea you're still carrying a gun. One thing I have noticed that I mentioned in all the videos, if you're not carrying a gun with the Arrowhead shorts, you will feel some bulging of the belt. And all that is the elasticity of the shorts that are around the waistline is shrinking up. And the belt is a solid belt, so it will not move like elastic moves, and you'll feel it bunching up around your waistline. But when you put a gun in there, obviously that smooths out and goes away. With the core belt and the jeans, they are incredibly comfortable to wear without carrying. A lot of times I just run this belt all the time. I don't need multiple belts. One thing to keep in mind about concealability is going to be kit. The nicer stuff you buy, the easier time you will have concealed carrying. Obviously, if you bought everything that we did in this video, you would probably feel very similar to how I feel with carrying this. But if you run a cheaper holster, or you don't buy a core belt and you try to run a leather belt, you're just gonna have a hard time concealed carrying this setup. And frankly, I don't recommend carrying with a leather belt. It is just really floppy and very inconsistent. With a nice thick carry belt, you can see there's not much flex in here. It's just gonna be a lot more comfortable when you're carrying a heavy handgun in your waist. When we look at my experience with carrying this 365 X Macro Frankenstein build, I'm gonna give it an 8.9 out of 10, which is very good. Obviously, it's not gonna be able to compete as much with these subcompact guns that I probably wouldn't carry anyway. And frankly, I really couldn't tell a difference when carrying the 43X and with this when it comes to concealability. Both guns concealed almost identically. Frankly, you could even say this might conceal a little bit better since this mag is sitting so deep in here. That's just not really noticeable when you're carrying the gun. Again, even with the tightest fitting shirt, nobody could tell I was carrying this. So when it comes to concealability, I think it scores very well. So when we total up all of the scores, we get a 24.8 out of 30 with this gun. Frankly, I think that's incredibly fair for me with this setup. This score is higher than both the 43X and the 320, and I think for good reason. This gun is kind of a combination of both of them to me, and with some unforeseen benefits being the ride height, it just happened to score a little bit higher than the 43X. That doesn't mean that this is an infinitely better setup. It just means for me, I was able to perform better with this gun and conceal better with this gun. But frankly, I think this is a really good representation of breaking the myth that people can't carry a full-size gun or a comped handgun or a gun with a heavy weapon light on it. There are a lot of preconceived notions about concealed carry, and a lot of it is nested in the old-fashioned way of carrying a super small pocket gun. Realistically, I just think that's an outdated mindset that really could be updated. People would gain a lot of protection capabilities if they could carry these mid to large size handgun setups, and that's why we made these videos. We think people should start carrying more of these comped or larger handguns to really be effective protectors. We truly believe that a little bit of discomfort really adds in the mental comfort aspect of things, knowing that you are comfortable, you are capable with this exact setup. A lot of that comes down to training and actually carrying this handgun. We know we only did this for 7 days. I can figure out how a gun is going to carry in a couple of hours, worst case a couple of days. The only reason we chose 7 is so that I could fully wrap my head around this, wearing a lot of different outfits and really trying to get all the information for what you could expect when you carry a 365 X Macro or a Frankenstein build, or a comped handgun in general. If this is the first video you've seen in this series, go check out the video we did on the 43X and the Sig P320. We deep dive into how those guns concealed carry and give them a final score. But if you guys like this video, we would appreciate a like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.